I've got the whole team up here today because I wanted to introduce you to them all, and I felt if we did that, then there'd be opportunity for you to grab any of the team members to discuss any of the points about the actual trial that we've run. So I'll start with Ian Lindley, who we've heard from this morning. So he's representing Dairy Australia, the lead RDC for this project. I've got Simon Adams here. He's one of the factory field officers who works at one of the processes that we've worked with. We've got Ashley. She's representing Australian Pork Limited, and so we've touched on a bit of that stuff throughout the project, but it hasn't been a key focus of the project. Nikki Reichelt, she's the representative from the University of Melbourne. We've got Renelle, she's our representative today for MLA, so unfortunately Doug McNichol, who's been working on the project, is an apology for today. And Bruce is here. Bruce and I have shared our project team role, but he's also today the representative for JBS Processing. So our trial has been about working with processors to see what opportunities there are to be able to engage with them and facilitate R&D being delivered that way. And so we've worked with two processors. We've worked with both JBS Meat Processing and also Warrnambool Cheese and Butter based down in southwest Victoria. So I must say there's also an apology today. Simon's representing Warrnambool Cheese and Butter. Rowan Alt's his manager and has been working closely with us on the project. But unfortunately there's been those terrible fires over the weekend, and Rowan is quite consumed with that. So the first bit I wanted to make, I didn't change that, did I?
I think you leaned on it before.
Did I? Okay. Was that I just wanted to make a couple of points around why the RDCs were motivated and interested in working with the processors. And that first point is that they really wanted to better understand, the role of the processor in the R&D continuum, particularly since the processors are one step removed, I guess, from farmers and the R&D that's happening on farm. The second point was that the RDCs recognise that the processors have quite a unique relationship with producers. They're in a position where they're often got that one-on-one contact with farmers, and so they want to be able to, the RDCs want to be able to understand, how they may be able to work with that relationship. And the third point was that there's some common areas that processors and the RDCs work on with farmers, such as farm business management. So being able to try to understand, where else are those crossovers occurring. So I just wanted to put up a couple of points here. Throughout the trial, we've really focused on an approach that's meant that we've been able to work quite closely with the processors. So I think we've put up here a couple of aspirations that the processors have said to us, and I think they're quite interesting and important for us to be able to really listen to in terms of making sure we work well with them. So I'll just read them out to you. Warrnambool Cheese and Butter said to us that we're trying to put together a team and a service that helps us build relationships. At the end of the day, helps our farmers become more sustainable and more profitable in order to run better businesses. This is their objective at the end of the day. And JBS Australia said to us that they're looking at trying to improve the results of our suppliers around compliance. If they get a better result, that's the producer, gets more money in their pocket, and so do we. So it's a win-win situation. So these points that both the processors made were really the foundation of the work that we undertook. Which one am I pressing? This one? Thanks. So I've just given a bit of an activity timeline for you to see what we did over the last year in terms of working with the processors. The first step we took was a couple of engagement meetings with the processors. So we really took our time here to understand what the motivations and the drivers of the processors were. That's where, for example, those aspiration statements come in, so that we went into these meetings really understanding, what their position is. We needed to acknowledge that they're operating in their own commercial environment and that they've got particular restraints that impact on how they operate. And I think that's an example of what we've seen today, where it's been difficult for those people who are on the ground working in a private business, being able to make it today, because there's other constraints that there's other demands and requirements of them with their work. So it was important for us, for this collaborative approach to work, that we found common ground, which is what we spent time with at these engagement meetings. And in both cases, in terms of both processes, what we ended up doing was working with the processors' frontline staff. So for the milk processors, that was to work with their dairy field services team and the livestock buying team with JBS. We then took an approach which was very similar. The steps were very similar with both of them, but ended up with some very interesting kind of outcomes, was this situation analysis. So we wanted to understand what the current situations of the teams were that we were going to be working with. So we surveyed both the dairy field service officers and also the livestock buyers, and asked them about their roles, how they viewed them, what they'd like to improve, what they saw as their own needs in terms of the role that they delivered, and what the role of R&D was in their job. So, and also building this picture in terms of where the field services team and the livestock buying team were, we also spoke to some of their suppliers and also the management teams within the businesses. We prepared a report and reported back to the processors on the key messages that we heard, and then we worked with the processors to come up with some activity plans, and we'll talk a little bit more about what's in those activity plans, and go on about delivering those together. And in some cases, well, we've called it co-delivery, but in some cases, what we've agreed upon in the activity plans is work that the individual processor has pursued themselves, and in some cases there's some activities that we want to do. At the moment, the current focus for us is with JBS is to deliver livestock data link training with all their livestock buyers, and with Waterable Cheese and Butter, we're doing some social network analysis of the field services team. So if you'd like to know a bit more about that, you're best to have a chat to Nikki. That's a process that the university does with groups. So I thought I'd share a bit of information with you about the teams that we worked with, so that you have a kind of understanding of the context that we were working in. So Waterable Cheese and Butter, they have 8 field service officers who are based around southwest Victoria and also in South Australia. Their backgrounds are varied in education and experience. So you've got people who've been ex-dairy advisors, ex-farmers, and also milking machine mechanics. And that's really valued within the team, having that broad range of experience. Their core role is really to secure milk quality. The role is to secure quality milk for the supply to the processing company. And the interesting thing about these guys is that each farm is allocated a dedicated field service officer to their farm. So they can, they have that one-on-one contact. Thank you. JBS Southern have 16 livestock buyers, and they're all located all throughout southeast Australia, and from southern New South Wales through to Tassie and South Australia. They again have got quite varied backgrounds, and their core role is really around, once again, purchasing livestock to meet the processor's needs. They build relationships with their farmers, but they don't have that they have one-on-one contact, but it's not, the farmer can choose who they might sell their livestock through. So the next slide is about the dairy field officers and livestock buyers and what they were telling us. They really wanted to add value to the roles that they had, and their roles are really extension roles. So you can see that in the quotes that they made there, and there's also in the kind of priority areas that they established in their activities. the processors really felt there was a real opportunity in differentiating themselves, and so this was how they're going to do it. We also just wanted to make some comment on the R&D connections that processors made, and we found that there are a number of ways that processors are currently connecting. The first is through the development of industry programs, and so for an example of that is Mark Inglis from JBS is quite heavily involved in the development of the carcass feedback that they produce for farmers that MLA have developed. There's also the delivery of industry programs where WCB have been pretty involved in working with West Vic Dairy and Dairy Australia to access training for their staff and providing resources to their farmers. There's also the capacity and network building. So the field services team and livestock buying team will take time to go and find their own networks and get opportunities for training. And also accessing research results, so making sure they've got connections with vets, Agriculture Victoria, Dairy Australia, those sorts of things, or running trials in the field. We've got a couple of suggestions there about how they could improve their connections with R&D. The first is around management. We observed was often involved in R&D, but there wasn't always a clear communication between management and their teams on the ground in terms of telling them about what R&D is happening. The other one is really taking that opportunity to expand your networks and expertise. And so that's quite important that the livestock buyers and the field services team get an opportunity to do that. The other one is frontline staff getting a chance to participate or contribute to research. So making sure they're, with all the connections they've got with farmers, that they get a chance to do that. So we want to be able to hear from those who have participated in the project and got value from this. We're going to start with the processor's point of view. So I'm going to ask Simon to come up and make a couple of points about what value they got out of participating in this project.
Haven't seen any of this before, so I got thrown in the deep end this morning. So Rowan just wanted to pass on that the program was a really good opportunity for WCB to get a non-invasive independent assessment of our service officers and our engagement with suppliers, and this feeds into our continuous improvement and refinement process. We're always looking at options for new training and evaluation of our team. The trial assessed how we connected, where we were with industry information sources, and the best pathways to access and process this information. And it underlined the importance of the field service team in their role to disseminating, good word, Rowan, info and extension and delivering farmers the right info at the right time. So it's a lot about timing, especially this last week with the fires. And highlighted the opportunity and the importance of the data and info packaging for our frontline staff and the potential opportunities to take a more structured approach in that data and information packaging to our farmers.
Thanks, Simon. No worries. Appreciate that. And next I wanted to call up Bruce, who's representing JBS Meat Processing.
Yep, so today I carry apologies from Mark Inglis from JBS. He's the Farm Assurance and Supply Chain Manager with JBS Australia. Today he's at a sheep CRC operational planning meeting, one of the many collaborative RD&E partnerships that JBS hold within industry. In terms of this project, Mark wanted me to share that the independent view of the company, the situation analysis, the skills audit of the buyers was, from a trusted independent third party, was excellent. Absolutely bloody fantastic is what he said. And right time, right focus for them and their company. It enabled strategic planning of the buyers' professional development and supporting further enhancement of their IT and electronic communications internally. It actually identified some areas of improvement and with clear and concise action plan. It's helped to generate more open communication within the company between the staff, the suppliers and the management. The process that was brought to JBS was a flexible approach of when and how engagement took place, because they do have commercial imperatives that override the nice to do things, although they had rated this as quite a high priority and gave it their best attention where needed. New and shared knowledge has been gained, and the key outcome there is the management is spending far more times with the buyers. They'd actually become a little bit isolated from the buyers in doing their daily job and actually engaging with industry R&D, and they'd actually forgot their connection to the grassroots, the buyers in their companies. And in terms of RD&E and adoption engagement, JBS is a strong supporter and partner of embedding RD&A within the supply chain from the get-go, day one, or even preconception, and developing culture, collaboration, co-investment and capacity building. So, thanks for the opportunity. Yep.
Thanks, Bruce. I'm now going to ask Ian to come up and talk about what the RDCs, and in particular Dairy Australia, have got from this process.
Thanks, Jacqui. And I am talking on behalf of Ashley and Renelle, so jump up and yell out or throw something at me if I don't represent you accurately. We, as RDCs, we already have relationships with the processing sector and different relationships. So some of those relationships are around research, some of them are around development, and some of them are around passing on information. But I guess the key approach is usually we've got this information or we've got this to develop, or the milk company, in this case Warrnambool Cheese and Butter Saputo, might come to us and say we've got this need. And that's okay, and that continues to be a way that we interact. But this process, the value of this process was that we were actually able to change things up a little bit. Dairy Australia and the other RDCs were able to play a slightly different role. We were able to mutually explore, and I saw that coming through in the other projects as well. I think Carol Hollier mentioned it was a chance to sort of step back. It was a little bit of an independent process, so it's a research process. So we were able to approach each other a little bit differently and take the time to explore the needs of, in this case, the field officers, from the farmers, from the company, and from the RDC with the research surrounding that, and that's been really valuable. And Simon indicated that Rowan had noted that there were opportunities to do things a little differently. So how was it different? It meant we took a little bit more time. We probably exposed things that we normally weren't able to in a research environment. We normally are too busy, or it's a short time frame. So we had a little bit more time. We fitted in with their time processes, as Simon indicated. So, for example, Rowan not being here today because of the fires in southwest Victoria. And what it enabled us to do was have a slightly different approach as an RDC. So the value for us, we actually got hooked into the core business of Warrnambool Cheese and Butter instead of just working with the field team and saying, here's what we've got, or this is what we want, and them doing the same thing with us, or in this case, West Vic Dairy, our local arm of Dairy Australia. We're actually able to do an analysis of the needs and then come up with a way of exploring how to meet those needs and when, in a time sense. So uniquely, what did happen was that we developed a professional development program with a range of ways of accessing that, with a range of different providers, or Dairy Australia, West Vic Dairy providing that. So much so that process was of interest to the HR of Warrnambool Cheese and Butter Saputo, and so they've actually utilised the process and the information that we went through in this research project to build in the core business. So that's been a really unique sweet spot for us, to think that, okay, we don't just push the programs out, we don't just ask them to be involved in things, and they don't just say, can you help us here? There's actually another way of interacting, and it takes that mutual exploration and a little more time. So that's been the really big key finding, I think, for Warrnambool Cheese and Butter and for us. And we met with other milk companies earlier this week, and we just gave them a bit of an idea about what was happening in this project, and they were very, very interested in a oh, Phil, you know, we can actually sit down to the table and negotiate this instead of just chucking each other our stuff and our issues and problems. So that's lots of other things were gained, but that was the huge value for us.
Thanks, Sam. So we just want to finish up with our recommendations for progressing the RD&E with the engagement with the processes. So we've got 3 points. The first is taking those opportunities to communicate what we've found in the project whenever we can. So we've been going out and discussing our findings at any opportunity that we can at the moment. The second point is encouraging the RDCs or to look at investing further in this process and take this approach and perhaps working with other processes. And the third point is looking to fund a person who could collaborate between the RDCs, the processors, government agencies and farmers.